Hey, family. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Sunday School Live with your host, Jermaine Thomas, A.K.A. The Professor. This is a thinking show, not an answer show. And I hope what we share on Sunday School Live would empower you, encourage you, but more importantly, challenge you to think. Happy Pentecost Sunday to those that are celebrating this significant event according to the Bible in tradition that the Holy Spirit came upon believers in the New Testament accounts in the book of Acts, promised to the Messianic Jews. And so this is a celebratory moment for those in Christendom, particularly even in the charismatic community. And then traditionally for the Jewish people, this is celebratory for them as well. And so I had made a post that I'm probably going to give reference to as we get into some of the heart and dialogue and conversation today. I know that I had posted and talked about the upcoming episode series called My Divine Life, and really dive into that. As we always do on this show, we take different uh, lines of perspectives, right? And just have a conversation and a dialogue, whether that's philosophical, scientific, biblical. We have a conversation, and I guarantee you it'll be sensitive and enlightened for you. However, in light of a few things, I had to make some adjustments to the commentary and dialogue that we're going to have today. And it hinges off of a couple of things. It hinges off a meeting I had the other day with someone that's working with me on a particular project. And so as that develops more, I will share more content about that in ways that you all can offer support and help and assistance in that. And however, in that too, that conversation kind of changed some dynamics for me and what we talked about, what I talked about with that person. And then some other things came about. So we're just changing the course, our approach today, or our topic actually, and what we're going to talk about today. And so hopefully next week we can really get into that content episodes. I don't even really know what to even title this, but I just want to raise awareness and bring awareness to a particular passion issue of mine with respect to the LGBTQ plus community. And there was an interview I did with our own Dr. Catherine Toon here on Goma. So I just want to send a special shout out first and foremost to our Goma family as a whole. Thank you guys for tuning in, tracking with us here at Sunday School Live, and to our Goma family as a whole, Dr. Catherine Toon, Pastor Mike, and a host of other great voices. So take the opportunity to like and share. And then in the comment section, leave a comment. Tell me where you're tuning in from. And for many of you all that have tuned in and tracked with us, thank you so much that have liked and shared our posts. So with that, I did an interview with Dr. Catherine Toon. It was really powerful, and it addresses that and how we as the church should respond. And as I always do, I bring up what we call subject experts. And so some clips and some videos I have here to show you all, to share with you all. Again, you may differ on the context of the issue, right? But I just wanted to raise your awareness and just bring sometimes things that's nuanced, substantive, that we don't often think about as we try to paint the world around us in such a black and white way. And I just want to present some information, raise awareness, bring attention to it because I think it's important. One being in this conversation and dialogue I was having with this particular person. One of the things that dawned on me then, and it has you think about it, but there's a certain privilege that I have access to as a straight heterosexual male, right? Or or you as a straight man or woman, in the sense of the terms and the words, right? But there's a certain privilege that we have because no one questions um, the validity of my sexuality. Nobody calls that into question. I don't have like that second sense of that I have to prove myself to anybody, because I may identify as LGBTQ. So, nobody questions the essence of my being. And so this conversation, I wanted to bring that part out of that conversation and just to highlight that when it comes to um, privilege as a heterosexual male, that this person was sharing these moments, encounters that they had, and I could not relate because no one has ever called into question my sexuality. Maybe a few have, but they haven't done it directly to me. I don't know, but I'm comfortable in my sexuality. I'm comfortable in all expressions of human sexuality. It's not uh, something triggering for me, and that didn't happen overnight. That came through life experiences, training. I'm a social worker by education, and I've worked in various settings that bring you to real life and real life issues and real life people. And so a lot of my fundamental thinking as a believer, a conservative believer then, was challenged. A lot of my thinking was challenged. And along the way, learning, growing, and experiencing, I began to take a different perspective uh, to a very nuanced subject and a very nuanced issue. And in light of a very polarized world that we live in, I think it's important that we build a certain skill set, if you will, around empathy, being open minded, being non judgmental, and just have an ear to listen. Whether you agree to disagree, I still think that emotional intelligence and developing core values, an ethos, ethics around emotional intelligence, I think is critical in this hour and this time, especially as ministers, Christian leaders, and because the world has changed. I ain't gonna say is changing, has changed, and our approach and the way we have conversations and dialogue, our language has to change. And so this is not me to lecture you per se, but to hopefully something I say in this commentary will resonate with you to say, hey, let me do my own introspection, and maybe let's identify my own biases and prejudices, and explore it and talk about it, and learn something different to become more culturally competent, to understand the changing nuances of this grayish world that we live in. Everything is not black and white as often as in a religious context that we would like to paint it as. And so, in light or in celebration of Pentecost, I had a different perspective of looking at Pentecost, and I want to share that little commentary with you. You guys can check out the hashtag Not Your Theologian to get this, to see this, to like it, share it, hopefully. But it was just in my own thoughts and my own musing when I think about Pentecost across various spectrums of thought and thinking, whether that's Hebraic, our Christian context, and just symbolism and seeing the symbolism and the meaning of it all. And so this is what I shared. Pentecost is humanity's jubilee. In a Hebraic context, Jubilee signified a new beginning for former Hebrew slaves and prisoners that was free. Tradition would have it that the debts would be forgiven and the mercies of God would be manifested, a representation of an old cycle ending and a new one beginning. For some charismatic Christians, For some charismatic Christian expressions, it marks the indwelling of God's spirit in believers. And for Messianic Jews, in the biblical text, it was the fulfillment of Jesus's promises to them. Jesus's promise to them. But for us mystics, right? I identify myself as a mystic. And I think in some aspects we all are. There's an inner mystic in all of us. For us mystics, no matter the context, the imagery and symbolism found here speaks to the current life cycle of ending and beginning. The inference I draw is that in our present age, there's a great sound awakening, whatever terminology phrase you want to use, but I like to use the word sound. There's a great sound of jubilee unfolding in humanity. Liberation is the song echoing out of eternity. In our innermost parts of our being, its expression outwardly, however, in ethnos, and that's different ethnic groups, cultures, and customs, it may sound different. It may sound like Black Lives Matter. It may sound like ending apartheid in Palestine. It may sound like trans equality. It may sound like women equality, ending oppression in all its forms, ending religious fundamentalism or freedom from religion, ending persecution of religious minorities that's taking place in certain nations and countries around the world. You can always go to the United Nations in website and look up the persecuted people groups in challenging systems of oppression. And so this is what I hear is the sound of Jubilee is a resounding sound in the human heart, in the human spirit. It's not just a Christian context thing of this awakening, this reformation. This is something inwardly, but outwardly, it may take on different expressions and forms, like, protests. And I really believe that systems of oppression are being addressed outwardly, but there's some that's inwardly that we need to address too, right? And then I said, there is a new beginning unfolding for humanity and for you. Look for new opportunities, look for old mindsets and old ways of thinking to end. A new reality of freedom bursting inwardly until the only thing left standing is your authentic and genuine self. The beauty and expression of spirit is always freedom inwardly and the capacity to live sustainably. You hear it, it's time to live. Live so darn much until it becomes contagious and infectious. You're not alone. There is so much life in you that's begging you to let it out. Be filled and let the world see it overflow. And so that was just my musing around Pentecost, the symbolism, the inference that I draw from it when I hear Pentecost. And you could draw the inference, the traditional perspective, and things like that. That's your prerogative. I just wanted to see that and to see it in a deeper way. And that's the impression that I got from that. And so it's just in this expression of spirit or freedom in the spirit also comes with a right to autonomy, a right to live, to be your authentic and genuine self. And I think that's an important that we unpack and define things sometimes when we say God is doing something new. Well, what is the new other than what has always been finished and established in Christ? And so I think we need to define that. But I believe that in times and generations, because we are living in significant dynamic times of change, and I believe it's for the good. I think I talked about, I want to share statistics how the world is getting better. I didn't bring that clip up today, but again, this kind of segue in topic of discussion do in part, I believe, speak to, spirit and freedom, life. That's what spirit represents to me. It represents the essence of being, and life and living. And out of your belly shall flow rivers of living water. I came that you may have life and life more abundantly. And so that's how I am celebrating Pentecost today. Sharing with you and bringing awareness to the LGBT plus Q community and maybe how we can assess ourselves and maybe make some adjustments in our own thinking, in our own inward thinking, to have a greater sense of joy, of community, because we're no longer making distinctions of us versus them, but seeing God in every person. I shared this a couple of months ago. I believe the next move of God is being around others that think different than you. And I believe that. And so I want to pivot here. I want to bring up some clips, some subject experts. I hope what I share with you that you'll be open-minded to just hear uh, and then share. And then I end with an interview that I did with Dr. Catherine Toon. And I think it's titled Bridge Builders. And so let me bring this up. Let me cue this up. This is an awesome video. I hope you listen, take heart to it, empathize, be open-hearted, be open-minded. It's a young brother sharing his testimony through animation. The clip is present on YouTube, and you can check it out. Actually, excuse me, guys. Let me bring up, so I make sure we give credit to this video. It's called Coming Out to Christian Friends and Their Reactions Animation by Aaron Hung, AARENHUANG on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel, leave a comment, or just check it out yourself, okay? I just want to give credit to where credit is due, and cite my sources. I don't want to get flagged too. So that's important too. So, but this is for educational purpose and for points to raise awareness. So I do not own this video or this content. It's just shared on this platform in this medium to bring awareness and to help drive the dialogue and the conversation that we're having about raising awareness and building an effective bridge builder. So take a listen, and I'll be right back. Oh, well, let me hide.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. One of the scariest things for a closeted person to do is to come out to someone they care about only to be rejected and shunned. Today, I'm going to talk about that time I came out to my church friends and how they reacted. First off, why did I come out to them? Well, I had just started dating guys, and to be honest, I was kind of pressured into it by someone I had a huge crush on. I feel dumb about it, but at the end of the day, it was my own decision, and I own up to it. Over the course of a week, I came out to 4 church friends separately. The first 2 were through Facebook Messenger, and they were pretty chill and supportive. I wasn't that close to them, and I knew they'd be pretty open-minded, so I thought of this as getting my feet wet. The next 2 were much more difficult. They were friends I grew up with and were much closer to. If I were to lose them, my inner social circle would be dismantled. The first was Toby. Toby was a silly guy who was always joking around with me, but deep down, he had a strong sense of respect for me because of how dedicated I was in church. We'd often go out to hike, have dinner, and hang out with 2 or 3 other church friends. One night he had invited me to sushi one-on-one to celebrate his new job, and it happened to be that week I started coming out to people. After we finished our meal, I told him I had a secret to tell him, and made him promise never to tell anyone. He agreed, so I told him, I'm gay. He laughed and said, what is it really? I'm serious, I said. He was in disbelief, so I started talking about the guy I liked, with whom I was going to go on a date. I showed him some photos, and he finally realized I was not kidding around. He said that it was fine that I was gay and that he didn't have any issue with it. But after that night, he completely stopped inviting me to hang out and was suddenly very curt in his texts. It hurt. A lot. But at that point, I didn't know he would distance himself from me yet. It seemed like he took it pretty well. So a few days later, I had dinner with my best friend in church, Nathan. Nathan was the friend who was always there for me. When I was depressed in college, he'd message me every day to ask how I was doing. Anytime I had a problem, he'd always try his best to help me and give me his best advice. He's helped me jumpstart my car, diagnose my lung infection, and talk through major career choices. He was a true friend. Again, after our meal, I had him promise he'd keep this secret. With his word, I confessed. I'm gay. Just like Toby, Nathan laughed. He jokingly responded, "Okay, good one." He honestly thought I was playing him for a reaction, and I had to show him my dating profile on Tinder for him to finally realize I was serious. What is it with these guys? Do I really trick people that often? We talked it over, and he took it very seriously. He took our friendship very seriously, just as I did. He said that he could not support or condone homosexual behaviors and that kind of lifestyle, but he'd still support me as a friend. It felt like an unsatisfying affirmation of his friendship. Yes, he truly wanted to stay friends and be there for me, but he did not approve of me dating guys and living that way. I took what I could get from that conversation, but what really hurt was when I entered a poetry contest online. I shared it on Facebook because I needed people to vote for my entry. It was an abstract love poem that didn't reveal I was gay, but he said he couldn't vote for it because he knew it had homosexual intent. That bothered me. A lot. So many other people were supporting me, but my own best friend would not, even when the art didn't have any explicit gay content. I couldn't talk to him for a while. Months. Being the good friend that he is, Nathan eventually reached out to heal our friendship. He didn't change his mind on his views, but he still wanted to be there for me as a friend. To be honest, I'm so lucky to have him in my life. Sure, I can't expect someone who grew up in a conservative church to change his worldviews overnight, but I can still appreciate someone who genuinely cares about me. I know it's not the most satisfying ending, but that's how my life is. An unending, unsatisfying conflict of religion and homosexuality. A conflict that is both internal and in my fragmented social life. But what about you? Have you had a similar experience? Did you ever come out to a conservative friend? If so, how did they react? Comment below on your experiences. I'd love to hear them. And lastly, it would mean so much to me if you would like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for listening, and have a great day!
Part of his internal conflict, between his identity and who he is at the core of his being versus, these religious ideas, these religious fundamental ideas in the community where you have the sense of community or should have a sense of community. Oftentimes community is shallow, or our sense of community can be so shallow. If someone has a particular view or belief that's unique and different than the groupthink, if you will, then they're often ostracized, shamed, and ghosted. So people have had relationships ghosted because of a certain view or change in perspective, that which is, or the larger thinking of the community in and of itself. So then that leads to believe that this relationship that we established, my church friends or whatever, it was really based on shallowness and not love. And so that's just something to think about too. That what this brother had to go through, and others like him, tons and tons of others like him, they have to experience these things. I don't. That's not a part of my dialogue and my commentary, and so it just makes you think and wonder my level of privilege. And so I want the LGBTQ community to know that they have an ally here with me. And I know that may be controversial for some to hear, but it isn't for me. And somebody out there needs to hear that they do have an ally in the faith community, someone they can talk to, someone that they can express, ask questions, and talk to. People need that support. And maybe you can be that for somebody, in your local fellowship or in your community or where you live or in your own family. So in the other part of that is the trauma that a person like that can ensue within, they can have within themselves, or become victimized by these accounts and moments in their life, whether it's the rejection of family members, their church community, church friends, or the hearing of scripture being weaponized against them. And so that could be very triggering and traumatizing for somebody. Again, I just want our ears of empathy to be open, not our difference of or religious difference, but just to open up our heart of empathy, open up our heart of being an active listener to listen to these commentaries. So I want to bring up a clip to talk about religious trauma syndrome and to give some definition to that. Again, this is just purely for educational and awareness purposes. It's not to infer that these are the Goma family belief as a whole. These are my beliefs, my expression, and what I'm sharing with you today. They're truly reflective of me as a person, Jermaine Thomas, outside of professor, outside of bishop, outside of minister, just as a person and a human being. This is my personal beliefs and ideas or expression of that, and affirmed in my heart on the basis of love. And so, and that's part of my worldview. And I didn't arrive there overnight. There were some things that challenged within me. Maybe you're settled in your thinking and where you are, and that's okay with that too. But it doesn't take away from being empathetic, non-judgmental, developing an ethos or an importance, a particular ethic to treat every human being as a human being, that they're worthy of dignity and respect, irrespective of our differences thereof. And so, and that's a personal value of mine. And I think that should be all of our personal value. This is why we have marginalized people groups. We have the stuff that we got going on, the us versus them mindset. And so, I'm going to bring up another subject expert on religious trauma. I'm going to hide myself, and I'll be right back.
So I think of religious or spiritual trauma as a subset of other kinds of trauma. So we often think of war-related trauma, like stereotypical PTSD, or we can think of sexual trauma. And I think that religious trauma is another uniquely identifiable set of traumas that has a particular set of post-traumatic effects. When I write about it, and when I think about religious trauma, I think of it along a spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum, you might have someone who has symptoms related to religion, spirituality, and spiritual practices, who has post-traumatic responses to those things that rise to the level of diagnosable PTSD. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have people who have much more mundane negative experiences with religion. So if we think of religious trauma in terms of the kinds of experiences that people have had with their religions, having negative experiences of religious community, putative experiences of the divine being, of religious theologies or religious practices that are harmful to them in ways that diminish the individual's capacity for spiritual or religious engagement in the future. So at the low end, it might just be that someone experienced an abusive religious leader at some point, and this gives them a sort of caution, fear, negative feelings associated with that particular religious community. Or at the more severe end of the spectrum, you might have someone who was raped by a priest or physically abused by religious parents, shunned by their community for their sexuality or gender identity, things like this.
Good. And so to give some definition to that, I hope that brings an awareness about the impact that religious fundamentalism, being so concrete, being so black and white, and how that can harm someone emotionally, psychologically, um, to impact them in ways that we can never perceive or see. No one is questioning if I post a poem about love, if it had heterosexual overtones to it. So again, there's a certain access or level of privilege that I live in as a heterosexual male than my brothers and sisters who may identify as LGBTQ plus. So that's my dialogue on that. And so I'm going to bring up another subject expert, which is myself and Dr. Catherine Toon in a video interview on her podcast that we had several months ago. And so I hope that you guys enjoy this commentary. We may not be able to get to the full extent of the video, but I just want to share enough for you to dialogue, to think through some of the things that I share and what we're sharing, in this conversation. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you're open-minded. Again, this is just, I don't even know how to label this particular episode on this show, but it just hinged on a conversation I had, and it just really just struck me to the core. And I thought that this was something that needed to be highlighted and something just to put out there. Please take the opportunity to like and share this video. This may help somebody. If it's really resonating with you, and you find what I'm sharing to be helpful, or even if you don't agree, just make it a teachable moment and say this guy's a heretic, and go point by point to the things that I said and share why you disagree. However you do what you do, but please take the opportunity to like and share. So I'm going to cue this up, and we'll end it there. And I hope you guys enjoy Goma. I hope you guys enjoy Sunday School Live with your host, Jermaine Thomas, A.K.A. the Professor. And I hope next week to really rein in and to start this new series about my divine life. But I believe that this was an important segment to have on a day that we're celebrating freedom, or the essence of freedom by the expression of spirit in Pentecost. And all of what goes into that. And you heard my commentary earlier in what I posted in my looking at this symbolism and some of the meaning I got out of it, and considering and thinking about Pentecost as it relates to our present time and age. So tune in, open heart, open mind, guys. God bless.
Jermaine, I glean so much from you. There's a richness in your perspective, and you have such heart, and you also make us stop and think. And we need to think. And I love it because Jesus is so secure in who he is, that, grappling with kind of the taboo, there's like no taboo subject. They're right. All there, and he's huge, and he's so secure, and I love that about him. And so one of the things we were talking about discussing, and there's so many different ways that we could go, we were going to talk about the LBGTQ, and we'll make sure I get everything in the right order, community, how that relates with the Christian faith, all of that. And I am really fascinated to hear your perspective on this. It's so needed. And, we are called to love as Jesus loves. And that's a thing. That's a real thing. Yeah. Tell us how this topic sort of became near and dear to your heart, and, what you're seeing, and to help us navigate and challenge us and all those good things.
Yeah, and thank you for having me, and to the Perspective family. Hey, so I think just with friends, conversations, and just being in the social service arena, you hear of issues, and as it become more of a cultural issue, if you will. Yeah. And today it's a highly debated taboo subject for families in some respect, but highly political subject with respect to the church and its concerns of certain religious freedoms, or the church's response, or what is biblical, what is not biblical. And so you have all of these various representatives, if you will, putting their stake in the ground, and then there's the arguments. And so I'm like, well, what's in the middle? you know,
Right.
so yeah. So I like to explore what's in the middle, and it takes a bridge builder to discern, what's in the middle, and build bridges. The church, the world knows the church
Mhm.
more for what is against than what it's
Oh,
for. And yeah, sometimes you would think that the church would need a person that would help. What you call those, like a publicist or someone, to help them
right,
get their message together.
right. We
A
do. We need a
spokesperson.
breaking helper, a spokesperson. Yes,
Yeah.
we're in need.
Yeah, to help us, grab our message,
Right.
and what's central to the Christian faith, the themes, the story, the message, and convey that to the world. But that has not been, the case for years. And
Yeah.
so statistically, Barna Group released, I believe, some statistics in 2020 about the state of the church, and people are leaving the church in masses.
Right.
In the recent political upheaval, the racial injustice issues only upended that, and so the church as it is, with respect to America in particular, is on a decline.
Right.
And so people are not leaving God; they're leaving these systems and structures,
Right.
that perpetuate everything that is not mirrored or reflective of who God is, as seen in the person of Jesus Christ.
Ding, ding,
And
ding. Yes.
yeah, so yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts or thinking that has been on it. And then as a social worker, to raise awareness and to say, hey, I understand that we can take a certain stance. We like to take certain stances. And I don't think that the church should not be in the public forum or in the public spaces to talk about morality or moral or ethical issues. I think that we should be chief among the voices that are there.
Right.
But we should not present God as a moral monster in doing so.
Thank you. Yes.
So yeah, so it is a bridge builder. I written down the definition, and I came across this, and I love it. It says that bridge builders are people who create relationships that cut across the lines of conflict. And so yeah, that's, I think that speaks of a mediator, and that's our role and function even as social workers. But bridge builders are people who create relationships that cut across the lines of conflict, and help people, come to a commonality, even if it's to a place where you can agree to disagree.
Right.
And that take a certain skill set and a skill level that I believe that church leaders and church systems need, with respect to cultural competence, to be
Yes.
culturally competent, and to how do you, as a leader who has a certain theological, biblical, moral stance,
Mm-hmm.
take the Great Commission, the call in the Great Commission, and engage the world around you.
Wow. Right.
Yeah, so we have to ask the hard questions, and we have to not just have the default response. Well, it's in the Bible, brother.
Right. Oh my goodness. Right.
you
And
know,
we're beating each other up with our Bibles, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. It's crazy. Yes.
So, and recently I posted, I said, just as much as we would like to argue that God is in the black and white, he's also in the gray.
Of course he is.
And so, and much of my ministry or life experience career wise has been in the gray. School preps you to deal with ethical dilemmas, gray areas of life, things that the Bible doesn't necessarily directly speak to.
Right.
And so I would like to just, raise awareness to pastors and leaders in churches, and to say, hey, listen, maybe going back to school or bringing an expert in, building bridges, even if you don't have the wherewithal or the insight or the understanding, find someone who does,
Right.
and bring them in, interview them, talk to them, and ask them to teach you or to help you, educate you, empower you, so that you can be effective. Listen, the church I just posted this too, that the church has always been poised to be the greatest institution on this planet, but we
Right.
have squandered that power. We have squandered that influence on everything else that doesn't reflect who Jesus is nor his message.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
so
Preach
yeah,
it.
yeah, no. So I would like to see, a course correction, if you will, with respect to the church when it comes to the LGBTQ plus issues
Mhm.
that's in our society. There's an intersectionality
Right.
that happens, and so I think that sometimes pastors and leaders uh, don't really grasp the comprehension that the world don't speak Bible. Okay, you
Really?
know,
Right.
our communities don't speak Bible, and then the people, the parishioners, have lives, and so each parishioner represents, a system, if you will. They represent a system. Their school. They may go to school. They have children that go to school. They have jobs. They have careers. They have communities that they live in. And
Mhm.
the way the world responds and deals with these certain said issues, particularly the LGBTQ issues, is totally different than how the church responds. And so when we're fear based, we establish labels. I believe labels are the things that we use to justify our biases, our prejudices.
Right.
And so we need to remove the labels,
Mhm.
um, and address our own prejudices and our own biases,
Right, right.
and
Well, if I can
have
label you, I can limit you, right? I can put you in a
exactly,
box. And I
exactly.
think it's almost a universal thing we do, but the church does it. I mean, we're the ones that are supposed to transcend, right? And we need help as the
Yeah.
body of Christ, actually representing a lovely God who loves all. But anyway, keep on going. I'm loving it.
Yeah, no, in the conversation I had with a brother of mine, he said an ambassador, right,
Mhm,
doesn't represent him or herself.
mhm.
It
Right.
represents the government that he or she represents.
Yes.
And so if that ambassador gets off message, right,
Right.
nation will recall that ambassador back and probably relinquish them of their power and their authority because they're not truly representing that government. And we as ambassadors, for Christ and for the
Mhm.
kingdom of God, have to be true representatives of the message of who Christ is and
Yes.
who God is, seen in the person of Christ. And so being Christ centric in our message, our love, hope,
Mhm.
we should be one of the greatest institutions of hope and restoration for the
Abs-
whole of man,
Absolutely.
no matter what uh, pathway, ideological spectrum a person is on.
Mhm.
When they come to us, they should know what love looks like, what love sounds like, what
Mhm.
love looks like.
Mhm.
But we come through all these different filters. We have all these different said filters, and the world can't distinguish who God is versus,
Exactly.
religion. And so,
Mhm.
religion has this negative connotation, and
Mhm.
I think arguably rightly so.
Right.
But it has a negative connotation, and so if you have a Westboro type church that has a certain response,
Mhm.
and protest, and the we all seen those. I wouldn't repeat those things and the things that they stated, but
Right.
if you had a Westboro church, um, those in the world don't make the distinctions. Oh, well,
Right.
those are just those
Sure.
groups, Baptist people.
Right.
They look at them as whole of as Christians. They so it's Christians, and so it
Right.
doesn't matter if it's the Westboro church approach,
Right.
to the world. They associate all of us
Mhm.
in that regard, in saying that that's our position. And so when you have leaders or Christian leaders who say, "Hey, um, let's not necessarily challenging the prevailing thought that's there, but
Mhm.
expanding our thinking around the given subject. For
Right.
example, homosexuality not being in the
Mhm.
Bible,
Mhm.
that it was a word, that term that was just written into the scriptures. It
Mhm.
wasn't there before in earlier
Mhm.
editions of the scriptures,
Mhm.
and so we should have the conversations. Okay, with respect to that. We should have the conversations, with our congregation. Now, a pastor may have his or her beliefs, you
Right.
know. So I challenge pastors to survey your community, get their thinking. Sometimes, again, we can be, such a stake in the ground approach, and that we miss the nuances given this subject. And the LGBT plus community, or that issue, is very nuanced. It's a very nuanced issue. You have to consider the psychological nuances.
Mhm.
You have to consider the emotional health nuances,
Right.
in the emotional well-being of a person in the state that they're in,
Right.
and have a conversation. Not everybody has been sexually abused, so there is the science, people, get into these arguments, the science. You got to follow the science, type of things like that. And so I've challenged people. I say, well, if that's your line of reasoning and thinking,
Mhm.
well, what do you do with, people that are born intersex?
Mhm. Right.
So what do they're born with both sexes, and
Right.
they didn't have a choice or decision, over the physical persona that they would take on. The
Right.
parents made that decision for them.
Right.
Maybe one part of the anatomy was more developed than the other, and
Right.
so they made the decision to go with
Right.
this
We're
particular
going to raise
sex
as a girl.
preference.
We're going to raise as a boy. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. And so now this individual is raised feeling trapped in this body,
Mhm.
subject to these social constructs and these social conditionings, and throw religious conditioning and
Right.
constructs in there,
Right.
and they suffer in that place.
Right.
Never coming to being them true selves.
Right.
And so I was watching Mulan, of all things, last night on Disney. It's a really great movie, you guys. So
Is that
check
the
it
new
out.
one? The new
Yeah, it's
Mulan?
the new one.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was really good. And there were virtues, that they were having the soldiers repeat. And
Uh-huh.
and one of the virtues was about them being true to themselves, or being true.
Ah. Mhm.
And so Mulan she was disguised as a male soldier, trying to
Right.
fight, for her family's honor, right?
Mhm.
And fight for the kingdom. And so this lady, this opposing force, or the enemy, was like, they were battling, and she was like, "Who are you?" And
Right.
she came up, with this name, her male name or whatever. And
Right.
she asked her again. She said, "Well, who are you?" And she said her male name. And the lady told her that you would never find healing, if you're never true to yourself.
Wow. Thank you, Disney. That will preach, right?
Yeah, that will preach. That was,
Right.
yeah. So you
Right.
know,
Oh, goodness.
and so we're telling the community
Mhm.
um, to be what we want them to be,
Mm. Right. Right. That's wow.
and they will never find true healing. And so this is why you will find uh, 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 people, they will conform because of peer pressure.
Right. Exactly.
It's
Mhm.
so the message of the church today, it seems like it's more about conformity
Yeah.
than it is about true
Be-
freedom
to
in
be a
Christ.
part of our group, to be in, you have to look like this. These are the things that are required for you to be on the inside and to be approved by God.
Yeah,
And right. Right. Yeah. That you're right. Keep going. This is awesome.
yeah, yeah. So we establish these conditions,
Mhm.
and people wanting to have community. They've
Right.
been rejected by family. They've been rejected by maybe a certain segment of society,
Mhm.
or internalizing their own shame and guilt of their own struggles,
Right.
or coming to terms to their own identity.
Mhm.
And so you see how this thing could be compounded, and then you throw them into a system that says that, hey,
Yeah.
we're loving, come to our church, we're welcoming, welcome
Except
all,
you're not
come as you are,
right. As
come
you
as you
are,
are.
but you can't stay as you are, because to stay in, you've got to look like something in particular.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. So it's double talk, it's manipulative, it's false advertisement. And so you bring people into these systems, and then they marry, And then all of a sudden a scandal occurs or happens. And we're like, oh my God, we're caught off guard about it. Why? Because we've taken the Bible, we taken scripture, we weaponized it, and we weaponize it so much that we've created a system of thinking that represses people's sexuality.
Yeah.
And that's a
Problem with
psychological.
sexuality in the church, any way it's displayed. Right. I mean, we've got issues. And so for us to try to overlay on people that are already hurting, we just compound and compound and compound and compound. And I mean, this is a real thing. And for us, we're supposed to be where the Spirit of the Lord, there is freedom. I mean, we're supposed to be purveyors of love and freedom. And so what does that look like? And which means that each and every one of us as the individual part of the whole really need to take a look at ourselves and how we are engaging with all of these things internally. So yeah, keep on going. This is awesome. Thank you, Jermaine. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, no problem. And thank you for having me. But yeah, it's important, that even in this present time, I was just thinking about this as I was getting on the show, to share. We've come through and still dealing with a worldwide epidemic
Yes.
that has caused people to isolate themselves, to extend the time, especially our older population, not being because they were so vulnerable. And so I want to take this way, but it'll make sense in a minute. My wife is a nurse. And so they were giving out the shots for the vaccine. And she said that, a lot of the old, because they started with the older community, and some of them were crying.
Oh boy.
Because they haven't been able to hug and, their family, their grandbabies.
Right.
Yeah, be with their family. And so this vaccine is giving them a greater sense of hope now to reconnect with their family.
That they can reconnect. Yeah.
So you got people dealing with all kind of issues, right? Emotional issues. Suicide rate has gone up.
Depression skyrocketing.
Depression. Yeah. So a lot of emotional things have happened, right? And so now that we're coming at, maybe, hopefully, we have a tunnel of light, of hope, right? Because of the vaccine. And so the church is now, the orders are rescinding. We can gather again. And you would think that the church's response would be one that is receiving to be restorative, to be of hope, empowering to people, given what we just come through.
Right.
But yet we're in a state of protest. I don't understand it. We're in a state of protest.
You're talking about the church is in a state of protest,
or state,
yeah,
with respect to transgender issues and legislation. Brett Hansen, in his book called Unoffendable, and I encourage all your listeners to go out and get it right away. In his book, he says, "Don't condemn the culture, redeem it."
Ooh, that is good.
And I thought that quote in of itself is so powerful. That Jesus, sees life in us, the best in us, and he speaks to that. Holy Spirit speaks to that and calls that out of us, right? Out of a mistaken identity, out of a life of doing life on life terms, living out of our trauma, living out of the pressures of life. But Jesus comes in and he speaks to the real us.
Yes.
And he calls that out of us. And so you would think that we would be postured enough, mature enough, as the church, to be the very same thing, to mirror that to the world around us.
Absolutely.
And sadly, in some instances, we have not been. And that's not in every case, in every situation. There are, affirming communities. There are what people are called the progressive Christian movement. Again, they come with these labels. I just think of it as we're in the age of Reformation. And just like during that time of Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation movement, the status quo was being challenged.
Right.
The Catholic Church was the mainstay of all things education, with the empowerment of the state or the uh, the kings and the queens that had their backing, right?
Yeah, and it was politically entrenched as well.
Yes.
Right? So they were kind of in bed together, so to speak.
Exactly.
So keep going. Yeah.
Exactly. And so you're kind of seeing those parallels of history with, as you, if you will. And so, the agenda of the church has been intertwined politically. And so there's this intermarriage between church and state, if you will. And so that's being challenged now. The status quo is being challenged. And people at that time, it was the Gutenberg press that put the Bible into the hands of the average person, right? Today, social media is our modern Gutenberg press. And so people are coming across, especially during this pandemic, they haven't been in the traditional context of doing church. People have been church hopping virtually. Social media has been the go-to forum of means of communication. And so people are coming across new information. They're coming across Goma. They're coming across other communities that's talking about the grace message, that's talking about the love of God and making Christ centric and making Christ the central focus and making his theme, the terms to his themes of his message, which is metanoia, change the way you think. And so that's in that message, in that context, he was talking to a very religious culture, culture that was very religiously induced with in their thinking, their worldview was very religious in scope. And so Jesus was challenging that culture to change the way they think about their relationship with Father. And so you're hearing that same message today with respect to Reformation and Reform, about, hey, listen, there is no separation between us and the Father. The separation was in our own thinking. The grace message, that you're loved, that you can't mess it up. You could try, but love is there to uphold you. People say, again, with the label sloppy agape or whatever, the message, but it is an empowering message. It's not, I like what someone said, it's not a license to sin, it's a license to son. Nice. And so, this should be our position as the church. And so I have hope for the church. I love the church. For all instances, I am a church boy. I grew up in the church. And so it was, I don't have church hurt. Sometimes when you criticize the church, people automatically think that you have church hurt. Outside of maybe some of the run-ins with the pillars of the church, my church experience has been pretty positive. It wasn't until God called me out of the system of doing church and to go on a detox, a journey of deconstruction in my own life and my walk, and now to come together, break it down to its bare bones. And what's left is the love of God, right? So that is more commentary to that. If you would like to link to the video, let me know, or I'll try to probably post it in the comment section. I thought I probably would just let this just ride on out, but I just wanted to come and just give some closing remarks. If you're watching this is more than likely a premiere. I had some other matters to attend to, so it wasn't. It'll be live on the premiere, but not necessarily live and me there. I'll probably be with you guys in the comment section. But listen, take the opportunity to like, share, give a comment where you're tuning in from. Take the opportunity to please share this or leave a comment, inbox me, however you feel to do so if this resonated with you. Thank you guys for tuning in to another segment and another episode of Sunday School Live with your host, Jermaine Thomas, A.K.A. The Professor. See you guys next week. God bless. And I love you.